My name is Ange Headlam and I'm the Membership and Community Coordinator here at Diabetes Australia. Today we are lucky enough to be joined by Carolien, who is one of our credentialed diabetes educators. Today Carolien's talk will be on hypo unawareness. As I've said, some housekeeping. Please just keep yourselves on mute. If you want to turn your video on, you are more than welcome to. The session is being recorded and I'll have that up in Diabetes Connect within the next couple of days. And with that said, I will now hand over to Carolien. Carolien, thank you so much for joining us.
Do you want to do this bit first, Ange?
Yes, I can do that. So I will just do the acknowledgement of country also for Carolien. Diabetes Australia acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional owners and custodians of this country. We pay the utmost respect to them, their culture, and to their elders past and present. We extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Diabetes Australia is committed to improving health outcomes for all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people affected by diabetes and those at risk. Thank you.
Thanks, Ange, for that lovely introduction. And it's my absolute pleasure to be here this morning. So the plan for this morning is I will be talking to you a little bit first about what is hypoglycemia and about the best treatments for hypo. We have a bit of a talk about what's hypo unawareness, of course, because that's the main topic of this conversation today. We can have a bit of a talk as well about how to improve your hypo awareness if your hypo awareness is not all that great. Yeah, a bit about fear of hypos as well. So a couple of different things all about hypos. But I thought it would be good to start with what is hypoglycemia. So hypoglycemia, often called hypos for short, are known as low blood glucose levels. So it's usually when your blood glucose level drops below 4 millimoles per liter. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that hypos can also happen if your sugar is within a normal target range. So, but if there's a sudden drop, so say if you've been hovering around 20 or 25 for a couple of weeks and you start on a new treatment and then suddenly drop from down to a 6 or a 7, say, within an hour or less, you can also feel hypo. And hypos can certainly happen in anybody who uses insulin, so hence they're more common in people with type 1 diabetes, but can also happen in people with type 2 diabetes taking certain glucose lowering medications. And I'll talk a bit about which ones they are in a little while. First, I wanted to add, though, that hypos are a complication of living with diabetes. They are unpleasant, and they can indeed make you feel really quite unwell. So most people will know when they are going low because you'll get early warning signs or symptoms of hypoglycemia, and we'll look at what they are shortly as well. But it's important to treat hypos quickly, or else your glucose level will continue to drop even lower. So what are some of the common causes of hypoglycemia? Well, first of all, delaying meals. So if you sort of quite a regular person, you usually have lunch at 1 and all of a sudden it's 2 o'clock, then you may start to feel a little bit low. If you're not eating enough carbohydrates, that can drop your sugar levels potentially. So carbohydrates, of course, change the glucose in the body and help to keep your glucose levels in check. So not eating carbs can affect your glucose levels. Increased physical activity can drop your levels, and it makes sense, I guess, because when you're doing exercise, you're using energy. But what's often people forget about is any unplanned or prolonged physical activity. Unplanned is, for example, as you see in the image there, this guy running for the bus. He wasn't planning on running, but all of a sudden the bus was there maybe a couple of seconds earlier than he anticipated, and he had to make a run for it. And that can then drop your sugar levels a little while later. And if we take too much insulin or certain diabetes medications, now that can be for a variety of reasons. It can be that you're prescribed a certain dose of medications, but you're eating a bit less than normal, and therefore it's relatively too much medication. Or it could be that you forgot you had your injection and take another one, or you forgot you took your pills and you took another one. And so then it's kind of like a bit of an overdose, if you like. And that can also then, of course, drop your sugar levels too low. Talking about medications, I promised I'll let you know which type of medications can drop sugar levels low. Although I guess all diabetes medications could to some degree, most of them don't tend to cause hypos unless they're in combination with this group of medication called the sulfonylureas. And the sulfonylureas include medications such as gliclazide, that's a generic name. It comes under brand names such as diamicron or Gliade. Glibenclamide, which is also known as Daanil, probably not so commonly used anymore these days. Glimepiride, so that's better known as Amaryl or Dimeril, or glipizide, which is also known as mini-diap. And then, yeah, any insulin, any type of insulin can increase the risk of hypoglycemia. But of course, it's important to have these medications to help manage your glucose levels from day to day. So it is important to get to know your symptoms better and make sure that you're prepared, prepared to take action to reduce your risk of low blood glucose levels. That can make you feel more in control and less fearful of the unknown, of the hypos. And your health professional can help develop a plan to reduce your hypo and your fears if you have any fear of hypos. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a little bit. But if you don't have symptoms or you don't recognize them quickly enough to avoid a hypo, it is really important to talk to your health professional, because that may mean that you have impaired awareness of hypoglycemia. Symptoms can include all of these. So shakiness, sweaty, dizziness, rapid heartbeats. So it feels like palpitations. Often people feel really ravishingly hungry, maybe feeling anxious, headachy, and really getting the cranky pants on are very common symptoms of hypoglycemia. And yeah, unfortunately, if we don't treat that, then it may lead to things like confusion, loss of consciousness, fitting, coma, and even death. And that's, of course, what we all want to avoid. But now to the topic of today. So what is hypoglycemia unawareness? Well, hypo unawareness is when you're having difficulty recognizing the hypos, or when your body loses its ability to recognize the typical symptoms of low blood glucose levels altogether. This is also known as impaired hypoglycemia awareness, or it's also known as LOA, or a lack of hypo awareness. And that's sort of my little acronym that I often use because I think it's nice to have something that is easier to remember, right? And who doesn't remember a lovely little hula girl? People with hypo unawareness are at greater risk of severe hypoglycemia. And that is where your glucose levels can drop dangerously low. So we're talking, say, lower than 2 millimoles per liter, where you would go unconscious or potentially start fitting and all those type of things. So who is most at risk of developing hypo unawareness? Well, definitely you're more at risk if you have type 1 diabetes. The risk is also increased by going low frequently. So whether that is during the day or overnight while sleeping, but the more hypos you seem to get in close proximity of each other, the more the body's warning system tends to turn off the messengers. Think of, say, the snooze on your alarm clock. Yeah. If you keep pressing that snooze button frequently, eventually you're going to be doing that in your sleep and you might end up sleeping in and getting late to your appointment or to work. And that will get you into trouble, right? So similarly with hypos. Having diabetes for a long time is another risk factor because it may mean that you had more hypos over time, which can contribute to hypo unawareness. And as we age, our autonomic symptoms, so the things like shaking, hunger, sweating, may be slowed down, and it may make it harder to feel a hypo. Declining cognitive function is another risk factor. So people with Alzheimer or dementia can it can mean that they are no longer able to actually realize that they're having a hypo, So they may feel the feelings, but they don't really know what it all means. And alcohol consumption in the short term can lower the ability to feel a hypo and weaken the liver's ability to release glucose when the glucose levels start to drop. So how that works is when you're drinking alcohol, your liver is filtering the alcohol first before worrying about any glucose, and thereby your level of glucose in the blood may actually initially be higher, but then later on, when the alcohol's all filtered out, your liver catches up, starts pulling glucose out of the bloodstream at a time of the night where it's actually supposed to put it back in. And therefore, hypos can happen through the night after large alcohol use, generally around 3-4 o'clock in the morning, say. So it may be important to check your glucose levels more often if you do drink. There are some prescription medications. There are things like beta blockers that people get prescribed to strengthen the heart, or some antidepressant medications can also reduce the ability to feel a hypo. If you have nerve damage or neuropathy, that can affect how you feel the hypos, because the nerves are not giving you the messages like the hunger, the palpitations, or those sort of things. For people with type 2 diabetes or other types of diabetes may also be at risk of hypo unawareness, as it can also be caused by the body's inability to make adrenaline. So that's where that nerve damage comes in. Adrenaline is a hormone produced in the adrenal glands and by a small number of neurons in the brainstem. And so it prepares the body for strenuous activity or in response to fear, anger, and stress. Sometimes also called epinephrine, adrenaline gives your body that surge of energy by actually releasing glucose that was stored in the liver back into the bloodstream. And although, we always, as educators, we're always pushing for a higher time in range, getting better, tighter glucose management. Glucose levels in a very tight range between sort of 4 and 8 is usually what we would recommend, right? But that does indeed increase the risk of hypos a little bit, unfortunately. So how do we address any lack of hypo awareness? Well, there certainly are things that you can do. If you suspect that you have hypo awareness, then it's very important to discuss that with your diabetes health professional. And we recommend that you do not drive a motor vehicle or operate heavy machinery because it can put you and others around you at risk if you do end up having a severe hypo. So instead, what we'd recommend is that you do more frequent blood glucose monitoring. Check your glucose levels more frequently because it will help to identify patterns in your blood glucose levels and prevent hypoglycemia. Always treat for a hypo. So if your glucose level is under 4, treat it even if you feel fine. And you may want to consider continuous glucose monitoring. Now, I know that currently that is only available through the NDSS for people with type 1 diabetes, but people with type 2 diabetes can also get continuous glucose monitoring systems if you self-fund it. The beauty about these systems is that they provide you glucose readings in real time over a period of time. So the CGM system will receive the glucose readings from your sensor every 5 minutes or so. And that means that you don't need to prick your finger as often, but to get a better overview of your glucose levels throughout the day and night. And the other beauty of these systems is that alarms can be set to alert you if your levels are going too high or too low. So that can help prevent hypoglycemia, because you could set an alarm at, say, 5.1 if the CGM predicts that you're going to be under 4 in the next half an hour or something like that. Yeah, so that'll be really useful to help prevent at least some hypos. But having said that, it's important that we don't solely rely on CGM, because sensor glucose levels can remain low for up to an hour after a hypo. Yeah, and that's because when your glucose level in your blood drops low, your body is going to try and get glucose from other parts of your body. Now, if your sugar level is low, it's more important we get glucose going to your brain to keep the important functions of your body happening. It doesn't matter that much if you've got, say, a paper cut, because we can worry about that later, right? So your body will take the glucose out of the skin to redirect it to the more important organs at that time. And that's why the sugar level in your skin can stay low, and hence the sensor glucose readings will remain low for a long period. So a good slogan that we often use is, if in doubt, get your meter out. And so that basically means that, yes, if you're actually feeling okay again after you've treated your hypo, but your sensor is still reading low, do a finger prick and you'll find that your blood glucose levels probably come back up to normal, but your sensor hasn't caught up yet. So the other thing we can do to improve hypo-awareness is to avoid any hypoglycemia for some time. So we would recommend that you deliberately run your glucose levels a little bit higher. So instead of, say, aiming for 4 to 8, we might say, okay, set your target to be between 6 and 10 millimoles for the next 2 or 3 months. By avoiding hypos for at least a month or two, if you don't get any hypos for that period of time, it will kind of help to reset your system and improve your hypo awareness. And of course, consult your diabetes healthcare team. Talk to your doctor or diabetes educator if you suspect you have hypo unawareness, so that they can make treatment decisions. Yeah, they can adjust your insulin doses or your medications to help you stop having hypos. And also maybe adjust your target ranges in your technology, such as maybe changing pump settings or whatever, to help you avoid hypos altogether. Now, I mentioned diabetes and driving before. If you develop diabetes, you must inform the driver licensing authority in your state or territory. In most cases, if you manage your diabetes with insulin, you will need a medical certificate, and you need that every 2 years. So if you manage just with tablets alone, then you only need a medical certificate every 5 years. If you manage your diabetes with a diet and physical activity alone, you're not at risk of hypoglycemia. So you don't really need to get the medical certificate each year. However, you do need to inform still the driver's licensing authority. You are required to notify them, and if you do not, you could be charged with driving offences if you have a driving accident. And if you are diagnosed with diabetes, you should also inform your motor vehicle insurer to prevent problems with insurance claims down the track. Now, hypoglycemia can impair your ability to drive safely. So if you have hypo unawareness, it's recommended you don't drive, because you can't recognize your hypos. You could be causing problems, not just for yourself, but for others around you. And that could be life-threatening when you're driving a motor vehicle. Right? A severe hypo is a hypo where someone else needs to help you to treat it, either because you don't feel or recognize the hypo, or because you're unable to treat yourself. You literally can't get yourself up to get your jelly beans or something, right? So severe hypos increase the risk of fitting and may lead to unconsciousness. So having a severe hypo also means you're at risk of having further episodes of severe hypos, and that can be very dangerous when you're driving. So therefore, we have another slogan, and that is, be above 5 to drive. Now, people with diabetes often worry or become fearful about hypos. I totally get it. If you feel that way, you're not alone. There are many things that you can do to reduce the risk of hypos and to ease your fears. Fear of hypos is a specific and intense feeling brought on by the risk or experiences of having low glucose levels. It's common to worry about losing consciousness, about having an accident or injuring yourself, having a hypo while being asleep and not being able to wake up, being embarrassed or attracting unwanted attention, relying on others for help who may not fully understand diabetes, losing your independence or the ability to drive, being judged by others, others not knowing how to help. Having concerns about hypos is natural. It's normal. It keeps you alert to the symptoms of low blood glucose levels, and that will enable you to treat the hypo quickly when it does happen. However, a fear of hypo becomes a serious problem when it starts to affect your daily life or the way you manage diabetes. So if you are starting to run your glucose levels higher to avoid hypos altogether because you're so scared of them, you could actually potentially put yourself at risk of more diabetes-related complications. So if you think you are experiencing a fear of hypo, talk to your health professional. They can help work out strategies for reducing your risks of hypos and overcoming your fears. They can help you adjust your medications. And whether or not you fear hypos, it is, of course, always important to look after your emotional well-being. So some of the following strategies may work for you, others may not, and that's okay. They may give you ideas about other things you could try. So the first step in reducing your fear of hypos is to inform yourself about your actual risk and how to prevent, recognize, and treat hypos. You can do that through this webinar by downloading the hypoglycemia fact sheet from the NESS website or by calling the NESS helpline on 1-800-637-700 and speak to a diabetes educator. Take care when you're searching the internet, though, for medical advice. Although there's some really good websites out there, make sure you always consult reliable sources. Wikipedia is not really one of those. Having a plan on how to manage your hypo will also help reduce any anxiety or fears you may have about the experience. So you could keep a hypo kit with you at all times so that you can treat a hypo promptly. That hypo kit may include something like jelly beans or juice. We'll talk actually about the treatments in a minute, but have a couple of those things as well as your blood glucose meter in your hypo kit so you can always action it quickly if need be. And make sure that your family and friends or other people that you spend a lot of time with, such as co-workers perhaps, know what to do when you cannot treat a hypo yourself. If you live alone, consider asking someone, say a friend or a neighbor, to check on you regularly. I know some patients that live by themselves, and they might sort of say to the neighbor, okay, if you haven't seen my blinds open, can you please call me, or something like that, or call a family member, or come and check in on me, or whatever it is. And that can be a tool. It's okay if you do not have all the answers about hypos or managing the fear of them. Sometimes people find that writing a list of questions or concerns is a useful way of processing some of the feelings. And then particularly if you bring that list with you to your next diabetes appointment, so you can actually remember to ask those questions and discuss the concerns that you have with your health professional. And remember that there are no such things as silly questions or concerns. I think all questions are valid. If it's a question, it's because you're missing some information. And your health professional will just be happy with anything that you mention because it will help them to offer you the best possible support that you need. Now, people who are less aware of their hypo symptoms often fear hypos the most. And that's because you do not know when your hypos are coming. So that can leave you feeling out of control. So keeping a record of your symptoms throughout the day can be useful. After a hypo, ask yourself, what do I think caused this hypo? For example, what were you doing at the time when you last ate, or when you injected insulin, how much it was, all that sort of stuff, right? Because nobody knows your body better than you do. Notice patterns in the days and times when you have hypos, and think about how you can avoid similar hypos in the future. So if you're often running low at morning tea time, well, maybe we need to adjust your medication at breakfast time. So you can then talk to your doctor about that. And ask yourself, what concerns me the most about having a hypo? You may not be fully aware of what you're fearing. Think it through, write it down, and it can provide you with a lot of insight. And talk things through with others can be a huge help. You may want to talk to family or friends about how you feel and how they can support you, but it can also help to talk to others who understand what it's like to live with diabetes. So this forum, the Diabetes Connect forum, can be a really useful tool. It can also be reassuring to know that other people face similar challenges and then share ideas about how to cope with them. So yeah, join the online community, which of course you guys already have done, otherwise you wouldn't be here today. The strategies above, or that I've listed here, will give you some ideas about how to reduce the risk of hypos and reduce your fears, but they cannot replace professional help. So it is always good to talk to your diabetes health professional. I know I've said it a few times already, but it is an important bit of information. So to prevent hypos, okay, as I said before, it may be worthwhile considering continuous glucose monitoring. Flash or continuous glucose monitoring allow you to see your glucose levels across the day and night, rather than just at a single point in time. And they show you the rise and fall of glucose levels for the duration of the sensor wear. I often hear people that are amazed to see the variability of their blood glucose levels, as the CGM graphs can show you patterns that may help identify how factors such as food and physical activity affect your glucose levels. So if you look at this image, for example, you'll see that if the person relies on just finger pricking alone, it would appear that their glucose levels are always in target. However, with a CGM, it becomes obvious that this person has some significant highs and lows. So how does it work? Well, CGM measures your glucose levels in the interstitial fluid. So that's the fluid around the cells in your skin. Whereas blood glucose monitors, so when you do a finger prick, it uses capillary blood. Now, there is a bit of a lag time between the two, and that varies depending on the device used, anywhere sort of from 3 to about 12 minutes. And that difference as well will be greater when your glucose levels are changing rapidly. So when you're having a hypo, the difference between your finger prick and your sensor will be greater. CGM readings are generally within about 15 to 20% of your glucose readings. So there will be a difference between them. That's just a fact. And the focus is not actually on the actual reading that you're getting at a single point in time. It's more looking at the trends of where your glucose levels are headed. So there are certainly advantages of wearing a continuous glucose monitoring. I mentioned the alarms earlier. They can prompt you to treat high or low levels, and therefore you can prevent lots of hypos. The trend arrows help you to make management decisions. So as you see on this image here, there is 3 different systems. They all have a glucose level of around 6, but they have different trend arrows. So on the bottom left one in the black sort of looking phone, you'll see a level of 6.0 with an arrow pointing straight down. And that will, of course, give you a different decision on what you want to do versus the one to the right of it, which is 6.2 and going up. Right. So if you're going down at a 6, you may think, well, hang on, lunch is not coming for another hour or so. Maybe I should have something to stop that drop from happening further. And definitely the other benefit, of course, of CGM is that you don't need to finger prick as often. but you do still need to prick your finger from time to time. CGM is not fail-proof, so it's unwise to just sort of set and forget. There can be periods when the system is down or when it's not reading accurately. And so when it's not reading accurately, you need to do a finger prick to tell the device where you actually are so it can then recalibrate itself. It is also, when you're using CGM, important to continue all the other best practices that keep you safe and healthy. So you'd still need to, of course, eat healthy and exercise and do all those things as well, because the CGM is not going to do that for you. Symptoms of high and low glucose levels should not be ignored just because the CGM tells you that you're in range. So if you're feeling low or high and the reading is looking okay, but your test's not feeling great, do a finger prick to double check the symptoms. Now, there are still some CGM systems that will require finger prick calibrations, although they're fewer and far between. But that's just another reason why we might still need to do finger pricks as well. So what is the best treatment for hypoglycemia? Because different people have different ideas about what works best for them, right? What's your go-to? You feel free to pop it in the comments if you like. I can't see those at the moment as I'm presenting this, but we could certainly have a bit more of a discussion about that later on. But here are my suggestions. Okay, I know a lot of people talk about jelly beans, but jelly beans can be a little bit tricky because, well, they come in various sizes for starters. So, how many do you need? If you have too many, your sugar level shoots through too much. And they can also be really hard to chew. And when you have a hypo, one thing you don't have is energy. So to chew all those jelly beans takes a long time. Whereas if you go through something that's dissolved, like say some juice or some regular lemonade, or even some sugar or honey in say a tea or coffee, right, then it will already start getting absorbed from your salival glands in your mouth. You don't even have to wait for that glucose to go down to your stomach before it gets absorbed. So the reaction time, the absorption is much quicker. What else did I want to say about this? Yeah, it's often just easier to drink a juice or a popper, and they can also be easy to carry around with you, right? And jelly beans, I don't know if you've ever tried that, but you put a little bag of jelly beans in your glove box of your car, and when you need them, you open your glove box and there's nothing there because the kids or the grandkids ate them, right? Or they've turned into this one big massive lump because they melted on a hot summer's day and they've now all glued themselves together. So again, that's where a juice might be handy. And most juices these days, like particularly the little poppers, you don't actually have to keep refrigerated. And yes, I know warm apple juice may not taste the best, but it's a delicacy in some countries, like in Sweden, where my grandkids live. They love warm apple juice. I guess on a cold winter's day, it's useful. Anyway, so another option for treating a hypo as well is some of these things like glucose gels or glucose tablets. And they're much less likely to get gobbled up by the grandkids or the kids. So yeah, there's something that you can get from the diabetes shop online, for example. They're handy to have, and just look at the package sort of how much. So with the tablets, oftentimes tablets are sort of around 4 or 5 grams for one tablet. So you may need 2 or 3 tablets, depending on what your educator recommends you to, how much carbs you need to treat your hypo. For kids, that's often 7 or 8 grams. For adults, it's usually around the 15 grams of carbs. Now, once you've done that first step, you want to then check your sugar level about 10 to 15 minutes later to make sure that your level is actually starting to rise. And it does take about 10, 15 minutes for the glucose to start getting absorbed. So it's no point really to start checking too soon. So that's the real big problem with hypos, is that you have to exercise a lot of patience. Like I said, if you're using a continuous glucose monitoring system, don't rely on that because it can take up to an hour for that to catch up. So actually do a finger prick to double check that you're coming back up. Now, if that level is above 4, you can go ahead and go to step 2. If you're still under 4, repeat step 1. So have some more juice or have the other half of your can of soft drink and then wait another 10 minutes, check again. Hopefully you're about 4 by that stage, and then we can move to step 2. And step 2 is also an important step because that will stop your level from dropping again a little while later. Because whatever you had before, the juice or jelly beans, whatever it was, will not last you a long time, only about half an hour to an hour. So having said that, step 2 is not needed if you're on an insulin pump called an automated insulin delivery device or AID, because your pump will cut back on your insulin delivery at that time. So your sugar level should in that half an hour equal out again. But good sources of longer acting carbs can be things like slice of bread, glass of milk, an apple, or any other piece of fruit, really. Even dried fruit is fine, small tub of yogurt, anything really, muesli bars. Some people think chocolate is a good hypo food, actually, and I personally think because chocolate is high in fat, it does take longer to kick in. So I would say have your juice first and then maybe have your chocolate as your longer acting carb afterwards. Then that would be okay if you're a bit of a chocoholic. But use your chocolate in step 2 rather than step 1 if that's your go-to. And then it's also really important after treating the hypo to review any patterns. Did you perhaps have a hypo in a similar situation or at a similar time of day recently? If you notice any patterns, or if you have more than, say, 2 or 3 hypos in a week, it is important to discuss that with your diabetes health professional because, as we now know, hypos should be avoided. So there are some great resources that have been prepared to help you in learning more about hypos. There is a fact sheet from the NDSS on managing hypoglycemia. There's also a fact sheet on fear of hypoglycemia. Some of the information on that I've used in this webinar as well. Diabetes Australia have their own managing hypoglycemia fact sheet as well. And yeah, I've prepared 2 webinars that are static webinars. They're on the NDSS website, one for type 1 and one for type 2 diabetes on hypoglycemia management, if you ever wanted to go back and look at the information again, or maybe to redirect your friends to who may not necessarily be in the Diabetes United membership team. Other things that you also find of use, no doubt, would be to have a management plan in place. There's different types of plans. Your diabetes educator can certainly help you with recommendation. The one on the left is designed by our friends from Diabetes Qualified, and that's often part of diabetes management plan for children in schools, but it can actually be really useful for adults as well. And the other one on the right is the NDSS version of a similar document. So I just thought I'd let you know that those tools are there for you to use as well. So yeah, that leaves it for any questions that you may have. So Ange, are there any questions from anybody?
Thanks so much for that, Carolien. That was great. I haven't seen any questions pop up. I did have one from Deb, who's just said her hypo go-to treatment is half a popper juice.
Yep, so Deb's going with about sort of the 7-8 grams. Yeah, and I'm assuming, judging by that Deb's probably either on a pump or really, really hypo aware. I see a hand up there.
Yeah, that's Deb. So did you want to, you can stop, if you wanted to stop sharing
I can stop
the
sharing,
slide,
yeah.
so you might be able to see a few more as well. Deb, did you want to pop yourself off mute and ask your question?
Not working? Try that. I've just allowed your mic, so you might be okay now. No.
You can't now, Deb? That we've allowed Mike? I'm not sure. I didn't set this webinar up.
Yeah,
Erin did,
no.
so I might.
Or maybe can you
have
pop it
to
in
look
the
at
chat or in the Q&A? I'll wait for you. Don't worry, we're in no rush.
There's another one while Deb types that out. Michael has a question here. After low, does my BG rebound?
After a low, yes, you definitely can rebound after a low. And so this is why having the right treatment for a low is so important. I'll never forget one time, it's going back about 20 years ago, but I was running camps for children with diabetes, and a lot of the junior leaders had type 1 diabetes themselves and had been to camp as a child and then come back to help the younger kids out, which was absolutely fantastic. Fortunately, those camps don't run anymore, but we had a really busy day running around a lot, and one of the junior leaders had a hypo in the night, and I woke up to this rustling sound, and this poor bugger was sitting up in bed, was eating his way through a kilo bag of jelly beans. He was about halfway through by the time I got there, and I tried to wrestle his jelly beans out of his hands while I noticed that there was also a 2-litre bottle of Fanta empty on the floor. So I'm like, oh my goodness, this person is so low that they would just kept on eating more and more and more to try and get the sugar level up. But yes, and about an hour later, the sugars were up in about the 30s, and we had to pin him down again and stop him from taking extra insulin because otherwise you will just start on yo-yoing. So it can really shoot through if you eat too much. And that's why if you buy, say, jelly beans, if that's your go-to, pre-prepare it in little snack bags so you have the right amount to treat your hypo is a really good tip, so that you'll know when I have a hypo, I just have one bag, one treatment, wait 10 minutes, check my sugar, then I can have another one if I need it. But you need to prepare for that when you're not having a hypo, when you're thinking clearly, in other words, because you're not thinking clearly when you have a hypo, that's for sure. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question, but yes, you can definitely shoot through. And then the trick is not to react to that. So if you have high sugar levels, then particularly if you're on insulin, I would suggest to, before you start adjusting your insulin upwards, always look back. Have I had any hypos in the last 24 hours? If the answer is yes to that, do not adjust your insulin at that point in time. Wait a couple more days. A couple of days of high sugars is not going to get you in trouble, but one hypo could. So always better safe than sorry. How did we go with Deb? Did you manage to get your question in there, Deb?
Yes, she has. Michael's also said, what is the time frame for rebound?
Yeah, that's sort of asking how long is a piece of string. I guess it depends a lot on your situation, what else is happening. It's very contextual. It depends on what was the cause for the hypo. So if it was related to exercise, for example, how much exercise did you do? How intense was it compared to a regular day? So yeah, there's no real rhyme or reason to that. I've known people that have had a hypo, say sometime in the morning, and that they had a rebound sometime later in the night, like overnight, more than 12 hours later. That's why I'll say, if you want to adjust your insulin, always look back at least 24 hours to see, have I had any hypos in that time? If so, don't adjust, because it could be a rebound, and then you're better off waiting a couple of days. Yeah. So I see Deb's comment here. It usually takes 30 minutes for my blood glucose levels to rise. And if I retreat after 15 minutes, I will spike and then have hours of roller coaster. Yeah, that's that rebound effect. Absolutely. I am hyperaware, have CGM and MDI, so multiple daily injections. Yeah, so really good that you can recognize your hypos and that you're so aware of what's happening when you do get a hypo, that it can take a little bit longer. So Deb, I think you said it was the juice. So yeah, maybe the other thing you could try is try a different type of hypo treatment next time you have a hypo, like maybe say a gel or some glucose tablets, to see if that might work a bit quicker for you, potentially. that you might get a better response maybe in a 10-15 minutes rather than after half an hour. Might be an option. It's always worth trying, isn't it? Because feeling hypo for half an hour is sucks, if you ask me. Yeah. All right. Any other questions from anybody? Doesn't look to be any in the Q&A.
No, there's no, hasn't been any more popped in the Q&A, and there's none in the chat.
None in
So
the
I'm
chat.
just keeping an eye on both of those, just in case. So are there any other questions at all from anybody that wanted to raise their hand or try and put on their mic? I'm really sorry. I'm not sure why the mics aren't working, because I know Deb is pretty all over this and can usually get her mic working. Deb's one of our awesome regulars in our webinars and asks lots of great questions.
That's great. Yeah.
So I
So
will.
it's probably because
see.
we didn't set up this meeting, so we don't really have the rights for this meeting. That's why we can't unmute the microphones, unfortunately. But please feel free to type it into the Q&A or the chat if you have any questions. Happy to answer anything. And of course, there's a new post there.
Yep.
Is it, there's another one from Deb, another good one. Yeah. Is it okay to drive if wearing CGM with alarms? Yes, it's okay to drive, but the same rule still applies. Be above 5 to drive. So yeah, I would check your CGM first. Now, if your CGM is saying you're 5.1 or 5.2, and particularly if you have to do a longer distance, you may just want to double check with a finger prick where you're at, because the CGM can be about 15-20% off. So but if your say is 7 or whatever on your CGM, you probably should be fine to just hop in a car and go, particularly if it's just sort of to the local shops 5 minutes down the road. But yeah, always sort of look at the bigger picture. Where am I going? How far am I going? What's the trend arrow as well? Because if your glucose on your CGM is saying 6.2, but it's the straight arrows down, like I had in my example earlier, then you may be dropping really quickly, and it may be worthwhile to just double check with a finger prick or have a little snack to stop it from dropping down further while you're driving, because driving really does take a lot of energy. I mean, for most of us, we've been driving now for a long time, and you're kind of used to it, and it becomes automatic. You hop in the car, you turn on the ignition, and off you go. You don't think about what you're doing. But remember when you first started driving, how many times did you store your car? Quite a few times, I would imagine, right? Because there was so much to think about. I have to do, I don't know, push in the clutch and change the gears and put in the indicator and look in my mirrors, and oh my God, your brains were exploding at that time, right? Because there's so much that you're doing at the same time. We now do it automatically, but it still requires a lot of energy. And that's again where it's important to make sure you have enough energy in your blood, enough sugar in your blood, so that you don't go low. And Deb's saying, I find looking at the graphs is useful as well. Yep. Even more helpful, you reckon, than the trend arrows, because you're seeing where you've been. Yeah. The difference between the trend arrows and the graphs is the graph shows you the history, so what has happened in the last few hours with your sugar levels, and then the trend arrow is giving you a glimpse into the future of what may happen. And so I think both of them are useful to bear in mind. Like I said, if you had a hypo a couple of hours ago, it's possible that you're higher now because of that, or vice versa. If you had a high before and you corrected it, maybe that's why you're coming crashing down now. So always bearing all of that in mind at the same time.
And there's just a comment or question in here from John also. Driving for me is a worry. I'm hypo aware usually, but the stimulation of the driving environment makes hypo hard to pick. Plus, the mental effort of driving consumes my glucose equivalent to moderate exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, good example of why it's so important to check your sugar levels before putting your keys in the ignition or pressing that start button, as the cars are these days. We used to always say, if you have a hypo, take your keys out of the ignition and throw them on the back seat, right? And that is to make it harder for you to restart your car, because when you have a hypo, you can do silly things. You may all of a sudden decide that you can drive to the nearest petrol station and get yourself some food, although of course you can't really drive because your brain is not working properly, but you don't know that at that time. So that's why we say toss your car in the back seat, your keys on the back seat of the car, so that you keep yourself out of trouble. But nowadays we often don't even need the keys out of our pockets to start a car, so that little hint doesn't help anymore much. But yeah, so if you're finding that driving takes a lot of energy, definitely check your sugar level before. Make sure you're above 5 to drive. You may even decide that you want to be above 6 to drive. Totally get that. That's fine too. Yeah, if you're not already wearing a CGM, continuous glucose monitoring, you may want to try that one of these days, particularly if you're going on a longer trip, to see how your body responds to it. And therefore you can plan better ahead. Certainly on longer trips, stop every 2 hours. And that's, of course, goes for everybody. But when you have diabetes, it's even more important to then stop and have a little snack if your sugar level is coming down, because it's gobbling up your energy. Yeah. And there's a message here from Michael as well. Waking up with a headache. I think it's low sugar related, yet correct blood glucose. Yeah, so that is quite a common one, actually. We can get low glucose levels through the night, depending on the treatment that you're on. And that can give symptoms such as headaches. So yeah, if you frequently wake up with a headache, it may be worthwhile to check your sugar through the night to make sure that you haven't had a hypo. As we know now, when you have a low, you can get that rebound high happening. And that may be why your sugar level may look okay in the morning when you wake up. So if you're feeling funny when you wake up, I would say maybe set an alarm clock at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and do a quick blood sugar check just to see where you're at. And if you're living with somebody, you may also double check with them, have you noticed anything? Or because sometimes hypos can even cause us to have things like nightmares or trashing around in our sleep that you may not be aware of, but your partner may say, hang on a second, yeah, you did whack me in the head a couple of times last night. That may be worthwhile then checking whether it was a sugar level dropping a bit low and causing your brain to do funny things, and thereby your body to do funny things.
I think Deb's put another comment in there as well, maybe
Yep.
even snack on some crackers during the drive.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're worried about your sugar level dropping, that could be something you could try and do. Of course, yeah, you don't want to have too many crackers. If it's a long drive, you eat a whole packet, then that will send your sugar levels up high. So it's about everything in moderation, really, and about having some awareness about how your body reacts in certain situations. And yeah, that's where the CGM is such a wonderful tool. But unfortunately, it's only made available through the NDSS for people with type 1 diabetes at this stage. So you would have to self-fund it if you've got type 2 diabetes. But even if it's just like a once-off, Freestyle Libre, for example, have got the special one where you can get one sensor for only $15. So yeah, you may want to just give that a try once and then see how you go with it. A lot of diabetes educators like myself in private practice have been given sensors from companies that we can give you a free trial as well. So I have done it for people that I say, okay, have a free trial of the Freestyle Libre and then come back in 3 months' time and we do a free trial of the Dexcom, and that way we can compare the data. I mean, it's no, they're like checking with two different blood glucose meters. It's not completely the same, but at least you'll have an idea of where you're at overall, and if we've made changes in your treatment to see where you're at, and that can save the cost, and at least for a little while. That is a little hint there.
Sure, that's a good hint for a lot of people. Carolien. I think there's another comment there from John, or question from John.
Night terrors related to lows and trashing out. How common are these hyper effects? Look, they're not that common, but I guess if you have a hypo, then yeah, funny things happen in the brain, and so it can lead to night terrors in some people, not for everybody. And I'm also not suggesting that if you have night terrors that it's always related to your diabetes. It may just be your body's way of dealing with stress that's been going on in your life, right? Yeah, some people are better dreamers than others in the sense that they might remember their dreams the next day, or seem to dream more. Dreaming and nightmares are a body's way to process information that's come into your brain throughout the day or weeks before. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. And certainly, whatever you're dreaming is not the truth either necessarily. It's just your body's way of trying to make sense of whatever has happened to you. And yeah, that could be related to lows. So if you are getting night terrors, it may be worthwhile just to check your sugar level through the night, just to exclude hypos as a cause for it. If you're not having a hypo at that time, then well, maybe it's just a lot of stress in your life, and that might need some addressing. But if you are low, then at least you can deal with that and avoid further problems.
There's another comment just underneath that one as well from John.
Oh yeah, can you comment on using the pump function to see how much active insulin is working? If there is more insulin working, I find I need to give more jelly beans. Yes, you can find out how much active insulin you have on board, John. It depends on which pump you've got, but in most cases, if you even if you're low, if you look at doing a correction bolus, it should tell you how much insulin you've got left on board. So if your sugar level is low and you say, okay, do a correction bolus, how much should I take? Ask the pump. It will tell you 0 because your sugar level is low and because you've got so much insulin left on board. So you can check it out that way. But bear in mind with your pumps, also the modern day pumps these days are designed when you're using them with CGM to be automated insulin delivery devices. So they adjust your insulin in the background automatically. So it would have most likely already cut back on the insulin delivery before you even have your low. And in fact, in most cases, it would have already suspended insulin delivery. So I would suggest in your case to maybe have a chat to your diabetes educator about that, whether maybe changing back away from the jelly beans might even be useful, similar to what I suggested to Deb when she had that delayed response. If you're finding that it needs more jelly beans, if you have more insulin working, yeah, don't know how many you're taking. All of that, it's again contextual, so I need more information to really comment on that, but yeah, hope that helps a little bit. Seem to waffle a bit about that one, but it's not a straightforward yes or no kind of or this is what you do kind of question, but you can see the active insulin. That's true.
I think I can see John nodding there. So he's yep. Yeah.
Happy with that?
Thumbs up. Great. Yeah, I am sorry that we can't get the microphones on. I'll have to.
I know, that makes it so much harder because then I could have asked you a couple more questions to get it clearer and whatever. But yeah, look, if any of you need any more information after this, right, you also have the NDSS helpline, right? So NDSS helpline, I've said it before, we can probably pop it in the chat as well, actually. I'll pop it in there. It's 1-800-637-700. If you ring the NDSS helpline, you can ask to speak to a health professional, and that could be a dietitian, exercise physiologist, or a diabetes educator. And yeah, you always get a very experienced person. You'll get referred to somebody in your state and territory who also sort of knows what the goals are, because there are some differences in different states and territories as to accessing services or whatever. But yeah, they can certainly help you with any questions you have as well, or at least point you in the right direction. So if you do have any questions left after now, because we've sort of come to time as well, I think, Ange, then that's one way that you can still get any questions answered as well today.
And also, please remember to reach out in Diabetes Connect. You obviously all can and get access to Diabetes Connect because you're here. I do have Beck, who's our accredited practicing dietitian and health consultant, health coach, who is in there and able to ask questions. If any questions do come through, you can start your own discussion post. If you're in Diabetes Connect, up on the top right, I think it is, there's a little create button. You can create your discussion post, create your question in there. If Beck doesn't have the answer, we can.
Oh, she usually reaches out to me.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. If it's not a dietitian or a dietetics or a health coaching related question, we can get the answers for you. That's what it's for. And also with that, rather than, if you do go to the NDSS, which is amazing, and it's an amazing service there as well, you can also through Diabetes Connect get your lived experience from other members who can help or maybe suggest something that has worked for them to your particular issue you may be having. But it is there for that aspect. More than welcome to create 10 posts a day if you want to. I'm in there every day, so I can help, or Deb can help, or we can reach out to one of our other team members and colleagues to get you that information. That's what we're here for, is to help and to help you live well with your diabetes and to get the information you need. And I am sorry again about the microphones. I will get that fixed up for our other webinars and conversations webinars, because I know with our health hours we can get them working. So we'll change that up so they're available. But for now, I think I will stop the recording and say goodbye and thank you for joining us. And thank you, Carolien, for a very informative presentation. I don't live with diabetes myself, but it is always good to have that knowledge. I think for me, I've worked with diabetes for 12 years, I think, with Diabetes Australia nearly. So it's always great to have a refresh of that knowledge and information if I need to help anyone that I know.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you've already put it in the invite as well. I wrote an article on the Hypo Unawareness as well that went into Circle magazine, I think. So yeah, that's also there as a resource for later on to look back at.
And also our longevity pathways. If any of you haven't gone onto one of those at the moment, we have 3 current at the moment, but we are developing more. I'm developing more with Beck and other health professionals as well, that will be coming out soon as soon as we sort of get them set up and evolving. But I know in the 3 that are there already, there is some information in there regarding hypos as well.
Awesome.
They cover a wide breadth of information, but please always reach out through Diabetes Connect to myself or to Beck. You can also email the team at united@diabetesaustralia.com.au if you're looking for anything and cannot find it. But we're here to help.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Ange. It was a pleasure talking to everybody, and yeah, I hope it helps you out in managing your diabetes in the longer term.
All right. Thank you so much, Carolien. It was really good.
All right. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.